Now we are going to discuss, until now we were discussing how the different kind of hazardous substances could be in place. So what is the nature, how they went into our body, what is the short-term limits and, the long-term permissible exposure limits. Now we are going to talk about the control measures. And again, whenever the word control we get, the hierarchy of control should come in our mind. Like if you are using solvent-based paint, eliminate and find out the substitution like water-based, which is less explosive, less flammable like this. So let's discuss control measures as per NEBOSH. There is, of course, a need to prevent or control exposure. Like prevention of exposure is the best. Prevention is better than cure. So much better strategy is to prevent of exposure if it's possible. If it is not possible, then prevent exposure, adequately control it, and ensure wells and holes are not exceeded, like workplace exposure limits or occupational exposure limits are not exceeded. These are some of the principles of good practice, like minimize emission, release and spread of hazardous substances, consider routes of exposure, use control measures, proportionate the risk, choose effective and reliable controls, use PPs where control cannot be achieved by other means, and also check control measures regularly. And no doubt, we have to inform and train our employees. You can also ensure new control measures which do not increase overall risk. Like in Europe and UK, these 8 principles are a legal requirement. Like in the UK, they are set these 8 principles as a good practice. They are set out in the Schedule 2A of control of substances, hazardous health regulations like POSH, control of hazardous substances, hazardous to health regulation 2002. It is clearly made a legal requirement to follow these 8 principles as a good practice. Minimize emission, consider routes of exposure, control measure proportion to the risk, effective and reliable control measure, effective and reliable. Very much important words are there. PPs and also control measures, make sure you check them regularly and inform and train employees. Ensure new control do not increase overall risk. We have a small group exercise. A gardener is spraying a weed killer in a domestic gardener in windy conditions. The gardener has no means of washing his hands, and the house owners have children and a dog. The weed killer is an organophosphate labeled like toxic, and using the hierarchy of control, discuss how the risk may be reduced actually. Over to you, please. A gardener is spraying a weed killer in a domestic garden in windy conditions, and no means of facility to wash their hands is available, and also house owners have children and dog, and the weed killer is toxic. So what would be the hierarchy of control? How the risk may be reduced? What is your take on it? Because in the risk assessment project, that is the challenge. We select the hazard category and we take some risk and we evaluate them and we mention who might be harmed, and we discuss existing controls are sufficient. If it's not sufficient, what would be the additional controls and who would be responsible to implement those additional controls, and the time bound, like the time limit, the most important one actually. Yes, it's all game of hierarchy of control. So as per this scenario, what kind of controls you will suggest actually? Starting from elimination, then substitution, engineering controls, administrative, and PPs, of course. Any one of you, please. Little more energy, so then we'll wrap up, inshallah. I know after the weekend, the Sunday is always a little bit hectic, to be very honest. But we have to be energetic. After achieving 100% marks in NEBOSH exam, you can enjoy your life again back to the normal. Along with the job, study is always a challenge, to be very honest. Yes, hierarchy of control. Process is spraying. Where? In the garden. And what is the chemical? The weed killer. Who is available nearby? The children and the dog. And hand washing facility is also not available. So you are the safety leader and you are the project leader even for that particular project. So what would be your best strategy? How are you going to implement hierarchy of control? So you can reduce the risk. Yes, please. Any one of you. Otherwise, let's see what NEBOSH is guiding us. What they're telling the practical control of exposure, either you eliminate or substitute, you can change the process, reduce exposure times, inclusion and segregation, or LEV like local exhaust ventilation, dilution ventilation, or respiratory protective equipment, other PP or personal hygiene and protection regimes, or health surveillance. For elimination, what they are guiding, eliminate process like outsource painting, chain work like screw rather than glue, dispose of unwanted stock, substitute hazardous for non-hazardous, irritant to non-hazardous floor cleaner or corrosive to irritant, change physical form of substance to one that less harmful. Otherwise, change the process actually. Apply solvent by brush instead of spraying, vacuum rather than sweep, some kind of process change. Otherwise, have some administrative controls like double the time, double the dose, half the time, half the dose. So minimize the time period over which people are working with hazardous substances linked to occupational exposure limits. Now, what is inclusion and segregation? Totally include the substance, prevent access to, and keep people away, and have some designated area for better segregation. Local exhaust ventilation, look at the branch ducting, is a good example how ultimately the discharge to the atmosphere is going to happen. But there is a dust collection bag, also air filter, you have extracted fan, you have main duct, you have hood and branch ducting like processes there. And whatever dust is coming through the line and filtering and make sure is directly discharging under permissible limits as per environmental regulations, not like whatever is coming and going into the air. Now discuss how the effectiveness of LEV may be reduced. Discuss how the effectiveness of LEV may be reduced. It will be reduced by poorly positioned intake hoods, damaged ducts, because these are the terrible points for the ventilation to disturb actually. Excessive amount of contamination if more contaminated points or contents are there. So ineffective fan, block filters, if you don't clean them properly, build up of contaminant in the ducts, and sharp bands and ducts and unauthorized additions to the system. I hope you remember that, case study I shared, this printing section. And one of the reasons the ventilation system was not working. That is why that area was terrible. Now, local exhaust ventilation is a routine visual inspection. You can check integrity checks like filters, contaminant buildup. So what I mean is one checklist, one safety inspection checklist for local exhaust ventilation. And you add all these points, prevent preventive maintenance, is it been done or not, like replacing filters, lubricating fan bearings, etc. Periodic testing, maybe you can ensure the air velocities are adequate and cost requirements every 14 months as per cost regulations. We have dilution ventilation. This is kind of diluting the contaminant, changes the air, passive dilution like vents, active dilution, powered fans. Wells is high, formation of gas and vapor is slow. Important to know whether contaminant is lighter or heavier than air. So look at this picture. It's a clear practical example of dilution ventilation, like passive dilution ventilation. The fresh air is entering the building through the windows and the opening vents. Air enters and escapes through gaps around the building. Gaps are designed into uh, you know the building actually, and then air containing contaminant escape to atmosphere via roof vents actually. So this is called passive dilution ventilation. This all starts from the design. But of course, there are limitations for the dilution ventilation, like not suitable for highly toxic substances, compromised by certain release of large quantities of contaminants, and do not work well, especially for dust and for point sources. Like in our Saudi Arabia, dilution ventilation wouldn't be so effective. So dead areas may exist where there is little air movement. And why it is not successful in Saudi Arabia? Because of sandstorm, high wind speeds, and several other reasons. We can use respiratory protective equipment like respirators, the filters contaminated air from the atmosphere around the wear, and also breathing apparatus. We gave an example of SCABA, SABA, and EBA, and advanced air breathing system as well. There are some benefits and limitations of respirators. Just in a quick nutshell, I can share some of the benefits. Respirators, face field, they are cheap, easy to use, and also disposable. Anytime you can change them. But limitations, the low level of protection does not seal against the face effectively, uncomfortable to wear. Same way, the half mask or OE nasal respirators, like good level of filtration is there, good fit achievable, easy to use. Look at the picture. But the problem is no built-in eye protection, negative pressure inside face piece, and uncomfortable to wear. So what is the best strategy? Use full face respirators like good level of filtration, good fit achievable, and protection the eyes, and also restrict some limitations, restrictions to the vein, and also negative pressure inside face piece, uncomfortable to wear. These are full face respirators. We also have powered respirators, and there are benefits and limitations, of course. Benefits are intermediate level of filtration. Sometimes I say you have respirator, but contaminated air still going inside. What's the benefit? So air movement cools wearer and air stream prevents inward leaks. Limitations again, heavy to wear and no tight face seal and limited battery life as well. What is the best one? Compressed gas, this airline breathing apparatus, air under pressure. Several benefits are there. Supply of air is not time restricted if a compressor is used. Positive pressure inside the face piece, and wear is not burdened with cylinder unit. But limitation, the hose can be long but not endless. So whenever we believe we are working and having a project in toxic environment, then make sure the breathing apparatus system is not like as a SCABA, like self-contained breathing apparatus. You always wearing here and it's a heavy weight, and of course it will be disturbing for sure for us after a certain time period. So what is the best strategy is use SABA, supplied air breathing apparatus, and make sure even though there is a limitation only, the hose can be long but not endless. Or we have self-contained breathing apparatus, pressurized cylinder. Look, some benefits are there: complete freedom of movement, positive pressure inside face piece. Look at the picture. But supply of air is time restricted and equipment is bulky and heavy. More technical training is required. Like in our case, we always have a separate one-day training session for H2S and SCBA. And some companies, they only send their employees for practical training of SCBA, like self-contained breathing approach. How to use, how to wear it, how to clean it, how to inspect it, just practical training. Now, when you are selecting or using or even maintenance of respiratory protective equipment, what factors you have to consider? The first factor is the concentration of the contaminant and its hazard. The second factor is the physical form of substance and level of protection offered by respiratory protective equipment. Of course, there is another factor, the presence or absence of oxygen. Duration of time that must be worn and compatibility with other items of PPs, because the shape of the user face, also facial hair like mustache, beard, normally it is not acceptable, especially for rescue team members who are going to wear scaba or saba and going into the, for rescue operations. So of course, even for the inspectors, even for the firefighters, it is not recommended to have a mustache and beard because any gap from anywhere, the contaminated air can go inside, which is surely harmful. Physical requirements of the job and physical fitness of the wearer is pretty important, for those. Now, users have to understand how to fit RP, how to test it, what limitations are there, and cleaning requirements, and of course, the maintenance requirements. It's not like always getting the RP or PPs, but later on, no maintenance, no inspection, no proper maintainability is there. We surely have to ensure hand protection, eye protection, and body protection, and accordingly, we select the PPs like gloves and gauntlets, and also chemicals, biological agents, physical injury. Eye protection, we use spectacles, goggles, and visors. And body protection is all overall, aprons or whole body protection. Personal hygiene and protection regime are there. No eating, drinking into that area. Washing facilities must be there, like cleaning facilities, basic welfare facilities, especially in line or as per the nature of your project. Vaccination, same like COVID-19. Make sure there is a vaccination for hepatitis B or tetanus or even typhoid. Workers' consent required. Immunity not allowed, not always achieved, but false sense of security. Health surveillance, mashallah, you all are doing, especially Sadara, in a better way of health monitoring system is there. And you look for the signs and symptoms of disease. And also, especially in bakery workers, they have lung function test to check for asthma. Same way, biological monitoring and screening on first employment. So that is all about, it's all game of a hierarchy. So ultimately, the PPs comes at the end, and health surveillance should be continued at least on an annual basis. So inshallah, tomorrow I'll catch you back. Until today, I think is so far so good. So let's not to be overdosed, inshallah. So we have discussed particular, the chemicals, the type of chemicals and biological agents. And before that, it was all about ergonomics and manual handling and kind of lifting processes we discussed related to forklift and lifts and hoist. Even we shared some technical methods about crane operations, safe crane operations. So tomorrow, inshallah, I'll catch you back. Thank you very much. Take care of yourself. Any question, any confusion you can share in the WhatsApp group, or let's keep learning. Even though the theory is so lengthy, but the way we are discussing the practical approaches, that is more important while performing your IG2 risk assessment project or even IG1 scenario based question and answers. The real thing is your practical experience, Marshall. But from NEBOSH theory, we can get some vocabulary, the sense of sentences, or if we are writing some paragraphs or some of the points we can get from this material. So consider your experience to be more important, and day to day keep an eye on how the things are managing through health and safety, best leaders, mashallah, within Sadara. And whatever challenges they are resolving, basically they are the scenarios, day to day, real based scenarios. And that is the crux of new trend of new pattern of NEBOSH IG1 and IG2. Okay, so see you tomorrow, inshallah. Thank you very much.